Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It's a scorcher here in Boston. It's about 88 degrees now. It was actually hotter earlier. But yeah, we've had kind of like a 3 day streak of some hot weather, but that's okay. I'm not complaining about it. We waited a long time for it. And, just stay hydrated, and that's what I'm doing. And, getting in the shade when I have to. So. But today I'm doing, again, the albums that inspired my life. And today, this one is Boogie with Canned Heat. It's kind of like greatest hits in some way. I mean, it has the two, they weren't a huge FM radio band. I mean, they did have, some songs on there, On the Road Again, and Going Up the Country, and a couple other ones. But this one's more, as you can see, it's got a whole, good story here about the band and about that time. And side one is Evil Woman, My Crime, On the Road Again, which was a big hit for them, as I said. World in a Jug, Turpentine Moan, and side two was Amphetamine Annie, which is a live version on Living the Blues. It's actually 2 sides long, but it's killer. Oh no, that's actually Fried Hockey Boogie, so that I apologize for. But Amphetamine Annie was a huge song. That actually got radio play back in the day. An owl song, basically the blind owl there, Alan Wilson, who was from my hometown right here in Arlington, Massachusetts, where I reside now. Fried Hockey Boogie, that's the one that's 2 sides. And Whiskey Headed Woman, number 2. And, this album goes back to an era. Me and my buddy Stevie D, we used to listen to this constantly. And he kind of was the guy that, I had heard of Canned Heat, I had heard the hits, but he was really into them back in the day. And, he's the one that kind of turned me on to some other stuff from him besides the hits. And, when I talk about Canned Heat, it was definitely of a certain time. We were young. It was, back when some heady stuff was going on. We were both kind of living the fast lane and the fast life. But that was the nature of the game back then. And I'm not saying everybody was like that. A lot of people weren't, and thank God for them. They saved themselves a world full of craziness and consequences. But there was a certain type of music that we listened to back then in the bars, hanging down in Harvard Square, hanging down in Boston Faneuil Hall, and just hanging around along Mass Ave in the Lion's Den and other places. What was the name of that? The Newtown Court. And, Canned Heat, Leonard Skinner, that bluesy rock, type of music, the Allman Brothers, and so on in that vein, was the music that was listened to a lot. And it was basically what we would call drinking music. And, there were no flowers involved in the lives of myself and a lot of the guys that I hung with. It was that 1960s flower power wasn't alive. It had already passed, and that era was fantastic, to be honest with you. It only lasted a couple of years, but a lot of great music came out of that. But by the time we were into the 70s, and it was kind of dark, and it was a lot of the stuff that we learned from our predecessors, brothers, people that we seen as we were growing up. We kind of followed that, and the thing that was on the table was a lot of trouble, a lot of fighting, a lot of backstabbing in that world. And if anybody knows what I'm saying, that that's the truth. There was a lot of acquaintances. People called each other friends, but that kind of was kind of a light word to throw around. and that goes for me too. I was caught up in it, but a lot of things were transfiguring, in my life there. Things were changing. You know, addiction was coming into into the vocabulary. You know, it was still a party, but the party was now turning into a habit. And like music like this. This album, I've had this for a long time. And what was this on? This was on, was it Polydor? Yeah, I believe it was Polydor Records. No, it was actually on United. And that's the album, and it's in pretty good shape, considering, some of the stuff that was going on around when this album was out. And I'm sure there's some residue and some many stories when this album comes around. And I put it on every once in a while, because it brings me back to a time and place. And I can go back to those places. I can go back in time to when life was it was kind of decadent, and as long as I don't sit and stare too long, I'm all right. Because there was a lot of good times. There was a lot of, fun times. There was a lot of camaraderie in certain ways. There was a lot of wildness, and as a young guy, a lot of us were attracted to that. But it got out of hand after a while. And, the things that started off so simple and innocent and rebellious, that stuff kind of got put in the vase and got like put in the vase and put up onto the mantle. And then a whole new scene started to go. People started to go into the cellarways instead of hanging out. People were going down in the cellars doing that white dust stuff, the old cocaine. And, it kind of split up a scene that was really tight for about 4 years. About 4 years, like the last days of high school. Probably like from freshman year to senior year. And then once high school got out, some went to college, some went on to good jobs, some went to, to both, and some, like myself and many others, the party carried on, and it got taken into the bars and into the cellarways and into the darkness, and and that was a shame, but everything changes, when you're in that world, things change. It goes from, blue skies and fun times, and then it goes into, dark clouds and pretty heady times and troubled times and crazy times, and that's just it. But, this album was at a phase of my life that, a lot of guys, a lot of angels floated away during this time. A lot of guys that I knew, that I hung along the Charles River with, that I spoke about in my last video, that I hung down in Boston with, that I hung down in the old projects down here in my whole town with, this wasn't a big album down at the old projects, but along the guys I met along the Charles, the Breeze, Stevie Monahan, bunch of guys. I can say Stevie's name because he's gone now. A lot of guys are gone. A lot of guys lived that time, didn't make it out, and a lot of angels I think about when I play this album. And actually, this was Pickwick. I knew it when I seen the P, Pickwick, and that was a subsidiary record company back in the day. A couple of bands on that, but I remember Canned Heat was. But yeah, man, it's like, but like anything, we all had to wake up and smell the roses, and smell the roses, And it took a lot of beating down, took prison sentences, took deaths, it took mental illness, people going, crazy from the stuff that we did. And I shared this today in a meeting. I remember I had been doing a little bit of time, and I called my friend Tommy, and he was like one of the last guys that I could call. And I remember talking to him, and he was like, Tim, why do you think you keep winding up back in these places? And he said, it's because of this garbage that you're doing. And I remember going back to my little cell there and pondering that. And then a guy, I had in there, all you do is either lift and read. And I read every damn Stephen King book that was out at that time. But I remember this guy had something to do with recovery on his bed. And I asked him, I said, what is that? And he goes, it's a thing about recovery. He goes, I really, when I get out of here, I really want to try to go down this path. And he said, "Why, you want to read it?" And I was like, "Yeah, can I just look at it?" I ended up reading the whole thing, and that kind of put the seed in me that there was a better way, and that if I followed that way, I could achieve something for my life and not go down in flames like a lot of my friends did, and acquaintances. A lot of them were acquaintances. I remember we'd get like 50 to 100 people, and probably I was close with like 3 of them. And that went from my project days to when we were hanging down the chows, when we were hanging in Boston, a lot of, but a lot of good guys, like, just because we weren't all best friends, there was some good guys, but, they were into that, live quick and die young, and make the best of it while you can. And I know that mentality took a lot of guys down. But you know what? That's what this kind of album means to me. And those days are long gone for me now. I'm a family man. I'm a, domestic person. I still dig the music, and I always will. It's a part of me. The grooves of this album are ingrained in my heart. They're ingrained in my brain. I might not hear these songs for several years, but I still know the words, and I still am out there on the road with these guys in my own way, And these guys, a lot of them died bad. I mean, the Blind Owl, Alan Wilson, supposedly killed himself up on a hill in Laurel Canyon. The Bob Beer Height, the Bear, they used to call him. He died of somebody offered him some smack, and he snorted the whole thing, and he dropped like a friggin' rock. It killed him right there. Henry Vestine was a wicked mainline drug user, and he died basically from his drug use, just from all the stuff that comes with it. And a couple made it out. Larry Taylor died a couple of years ago, but I think he lived on, played in a lot of albums, and always was there when the Canned Heat got revised again. And Fido De La Plata, I believe I know he's still alive, and he was keeping the name of this band going, but it was a whole different cast of characters. But I know a buddy of mine, Terry, that went to see him, and he said that it was a good night. Them and 10 years after, and I think Savoy Brown, those are other bands I grew up with and that I'll feature at some time. But anyways, it's Friday, it's the weekend. My weekend starts now. I wish you all a great weekend. Stay hydrated, have fun, but don't take it over the friggin' edge. And this is Tim O, and always a pleasure to see you. And hang tough, my friends. Take care.